Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Please give me just a minute to get started. We are running about 2 minutes behind, and it's a very funny story why. I'll tell you all in just a second. Give me 1 second. We got to turn the purple lights off. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. This was all we were doing filming testing all day. It's been a chaotic day, my friends. It's been a chaotic day. Even more so chaotic with the call I just got. All righty. Welcome, everybody. Give me 1 second to get everything set up here. How's everybody doing? How are you doing? Class number 2, who's ready? Hope everybody is doing well. Let me get everything properly shared here. All right, there we go. All right, so we'll wait a couple minutes before we truly dive deep, but funny story, one of you is devious. One of you is a devious person here. Let me make sure that my microphone is plugged in correctly. All right, everyone can hear me, right? All right. So one of you is a devious little monk and is a high school student who decided to purchase the mastermind on your parents' credit card without their knowledge, which I know there were some younger people in the application, but nobody ever mentioned to me that they were going to be using their parents' credit card without their permission. So we got some emails. We got a call to our customer support agent who then referred to us that somebody is not going to be able to be a part of our class because their parents are asking. So, I mean, honestly, like you're such a weapon. Like you're a badass. I feel like that's some shit that I would have done. I would have like tried to sneak it on my parents, and they would have I don't know. Maybe my mom would have found it for sure. Maybe my dad's the type. He only checks his statements too often. But $2,000 is a big. You'd see that, right? Like you had to have known that you were gonna get caught. So like I respect the hustle so much that like that all happened in the last like 6 minutes. So that if there's a reason this is all fresh in my head and there's a reason that I'm bringing this up, is that literally I was like getting ready to get the meeting started, getting my slides all prepared on my computer, and I get a transfer to call. It's like, hey, by the way, you got a call on your customer support number. It's like, oh, what is this? So, oh my gosh. So I genuinely respect the hustle. Seriously, that was in a favorite point. So I give you serious props. We'll figure something out because it's a hustler move. It truly is. So let me make sure that everybody is muted and cannot unmute themselves. Let me make sure that I got this subtracted the right way. So sorry for the little bit of the delay in the start, but that allows our attendance to creep up a little bit as well, right around to the area that I expect us to be for the live session. So welcome back, everybody, officially to Mastermind 10.0 Lesson 2. I am extremely excited. I know that the last few days have felt relatively introductory. Tonight is going to have some elements that will feel a little bit introductory, but I promise you I'm going to introduce you to some new stuff that is very, very important for your success as a trader, that is not talked about anywhere on my YouTube, that's not talked about anywhere out there in the sphere. It's going to introduce some new concepts tonight. So I know that there are some of you, mainly there's one person who has reached out to me via DMs expressing some concern, essentially feeling like so far everything that we've covered has been for beginners. I promise you this course is not designed for beginners. We are designed mainly for all one size fits all, but the vast majority of students do have trading experience. In our next 3 lessons or next 4 lessons, I'm about to shift everything in the way that you do. I promise you, give me that opportunity. And as soon as we finish up our lesson 5, I wasn't going to reveal this until, most people know it, but I wasn't going to make the big announcement to it until then. But for those of you who feel like you want more technical strategy in there, I completely understand. As soon as we finish lesson 5 in our program, which for us occurs on next Thursday, not only do you know my entire technical system, A to Z throughout, you're going to know everything. And I promise you that that is not stuff that you'll find out there in the YouTube sphere or in other courses or in anything like that, unless it was from me myself, right? But in addition to those 3 lessons that will be primarily technical, right? 3 through 5, as soon as we are done with lesson 5, you get access to a separate Kajabi. And that separate Kajabi is called the Mastermind bonus lesson Kajabi, right? So within there, I believe it's now at 16 videos, but don't quote me, it might be at 15. We'll check, but it is at 15 or 16 additional bonus lessons, all of which are about an hour to 2 hours long, depending on what the lesson is, right? Many of them are repeat lesson 5, like 6 or 7 of them are going to be repeat lesson 5s, as we use a different example, and that lesson is going to be something we're going to talk about in depth. You're going to have several bar by bar technical lessons where we break down individual charts one by one. You're going to have multiple live trade reviews where I record my screen and walk you through my emotions, my management on a trade, including one that I recorded on Monday and we got posted for Mastermind 1 through 9. So you are going to get access to all of that come next Thursday. And that's like a giant technical, it's like, it's a technical wet dream, right? It is so much strategy that it is an absurd amount of information. Truth be told, most of our Mastermind students, which makes me sad, they don't complete watching all of it because we can see who's watched what on Kajabi. And in theory, you will have only received your Mastermind 5, lesson 5 in person. So we can see, and so I encourage you all, when you have access to that in literally 8 days, to then become one of our like 20%, 30% students that actually watch every single bonus lesson through. I don't quote me on the number, it's probably closer to 40% now. But I highly, highly encourage you to go through all of that. So I promise you, everything that I'm teaching you in this program, while it might be like, for some people, it might be like, this is a little bit slow in the beginning, I promise you it's with intention. Nothing that I do is without intention. Everything that we do here, we're going to circle back on lesson 8. I had a student with a conversation with one of our students where he said he likes the way that I said, this is the last course that he'll ever have to take. When I say that shit, I mean it. Nobody from our program goes and takes something else afterwards, right? Unless they're taking, it's just something to master our exact system. It just comes down to mastery after this. Give me this time. I promise you, right? That being said, I've ranted enough. We are now officially at 5:08 Pacific, 8:08 Eastern. Let us begin. We are at exactly where I expect us to be in terms of this evening's attendance. So in tonight's lesson, we are going to be covering an extremely specific topic, and that is going to be risk. Right now, I know that risk management is something that you can Google and find information about, right? So I'm going to do my best to teach it to you in a way that actually sticks, a system that actually works, a process in place for you to actually grow a particular account size, whatever that account size might be. In tonight's lesson, we are going to specifically talk about how to grow a $2,000 account. And the reason why we do a $2,000 account will be explained very much in detail, right? Of course, if you're it's like, that doesn't apply to me, I trade with bigger money, you can just scale up the numbers. It works perfectly fine no matter what, right? In addition to that, we are also going to cover what I refer to as my psychology pillars, right? These are phrases, statements, things that I use in order to best manage my emotions as I am trading, right? So with that being said, let us waste no more time and we will dive right in, right? So the first things first, when we're talking about risk, there's a few different ways that you can talk about risk management, right? There's a few different ways that you can use and define the word risk as a trader as a whole. But one of the things that I truly believe at my core is that as traders, right, our main thing that leads us to success is our risk management principles, right? It is what we do to manage and mitigate our risk on a daily basis, right? So there's this first comparison that I always like to make, and I'm sure it's one that you've heard before, but is that trading is similar to gambling, right? And it might be that you've heard that in a negative way, or you might have heard somebody try to educate that in a positive way, right? And the reality is that it actually, they have very similar traits. They have extremely similar traits, right? If you look at trading and blackjack, the traits between the two are very, very similar. There's just some things in trading that give you a significantly larger edge than you would have in a game like blackjack, right? So you have to ask yourself the question, typically speaking, who makes money when you're referring to casinos, right? When you're looking at casinos and gamblers, historically, the people who make money are the casinos, right? They make money off people making emotional decisions, losing money. They make money off the odds of the game, right? That's how usually the vast majority of the money is made, is through the casino route, right? However, there are going to be these select few gamblers that ultimately find their way to have success in the markets, right? They find success in whatever game it might be, whether it's poker, whether it's, I don't know, it's usually poker, right? But whatever it might be, or sports betting, maybe whatever the case, right? They create some sort of edge and they are able to extract money from the casino, right? On a regular basis. So in that analogy, we are hoping to emulate, right? The profitable gambler, right? The gambler that's able to beat the system, that's able to figure out how to extract money from a regular basis on the casino. In that scenario, that's who we are trying to emulate, right? The other side of that equation, though, is that we would also kind of like to emulate what the casino itself does. This is the part of the equation where I believe it gets a little bit confusing, because most of the time people who teach this will teach you that you need to trade like the casino, right? And I don't necessarily believe that's fully true. Trade like the casino means that you need to have a statistical or probable edge in your trading, right? For us, that's really not a problem, right? Like, if there's one thing every Master3 student will agree on, the system works. We're going to have an edge. You're going to learn it in our next 3 lessons. The lack of edge is usually never the problem for anybody. It's just a matter of mastering the edge. And then comes the hard part, which is mastering your own psychology, right? So in order to answer this equation analogy properly, yes, we want to be like the casino, which is what most educators teach when it refers to this analogy. But for us, we also want to take mostly the traits of that profitable gambler, right? Which is the profitable gambler, what they most likely have as their edge over the casino is their ability to control their psychology and their emotions, right? So for us, we want to take a little bit of both from the casino and from the profitable gambler, and then ultimately turn that into us as a possible trader, right? There's this blackjack analogy for trading that I always love. So for those of you who aren't familiar with blackjack, it's a card game where before you even receive your cards, you have to place a bet, right? And so you could end up getting a hand that has a relatively low probability, while the dealer who you're playing against gets a hand that has a high probability, right? That's always the potential outcome of the game, right? I believe that the odds are like 51-49 in favor of the house in the casino, but essentially there isn't a huge statistical edge, unless you're counting cards, in playing blackjack, right? You're not able to make your betting decision basing how much you're going to risk based off the data that you have. Trading, if done properly, if executed the right way, is literally like playing blackjack, except you can see what hand you have in advance, right? For those of you who aren't familiar with blackjack, if you have a 19, 20, or 21, while the dealer has a specific set of cards, you have a good chance, statistically speaking, of winning, right? Those would be the opportunities in trading where you would see high quality setups actually taking place and where you can put your money at risk, right? So that's the beauty of trading as a whole. Again, I'm not going to go on for long about that because most of you here don't need to be sold on that. You are here for a reason, right? But at the end of the day, the reason why I bring that up is because the hardest part about that in trading is we know that trading can be better than gambling in the sense that you can see your cards in advance. The hard part isn't knowing that. The hard part is actually sitting there and waiting to figure out whether or not you have a better hand than the dealer. Because most people will end up sitting there and saying, oh, I have a hand that I think it's meh, okay, and they'll take the trade, right? So it's, again, rather than these generic examples, it's more we need to extract the traits from all of these different analogies. So for us, from the casinos, we are trying to extract a statistically probable edge, which in our system we have, check, right? From the profitable traders, we are trying to, or profitable gamblers, we are trying to extract their psychology and what they focus on in order to not give their money back to the casino after they make it, right? And for us, ultimately, blackjack represents this analogy where we are able to actually see the cards that we're going to be playing that hand with prior to the hand being dealt so that we can judge our risk based off of that. Right? So we're going to talk about this next section a lot more in our next 2 lessons, right? But for us, in order to find optimal risk, right? The main way that it starts is finding a certain risk to reward ratio, right? The way that we do that is using trend analysis to find our entries. We use our longer time frames, which of course I'm going to dive into this in very, very much detail, right? But above all else, it comes down to remaining disciplined, right? The blackjack example remains paramount above all else, right? So the next aspect of risk in general that we're going to cover is R multiple, right? Now, stick with me because I promise you again, while I may not be reinventing the wheel here with the first few slides, there's a part of R multiple that is not talked about enough at all. And we are going to go through it tonight, and we're going to take a deeper look at a chart on TradingView later on and specifically look at, okay, here's how we would manage this specific part of R multiple, right? So first, let's give a very basic definition to R multiple and talk about it as a whole, right? So understanding your R multiple is extremely key. I'm realizing now that I accidentally skipped this one particular line, right? But one last thing that we do in our own trading to give ourselves an edge as traders, right, is that we, which I'm assuming all of you know this, even the 14 of you who are brand new, right, having gone through this, our beginner's guide, I have a feeling you'll know this, right? At bare minimum, the goal of trading is to risk $1 to make $2. Right? Knowing that we might end up with a 50% win rate or even lower sometimes, and that all depends, right, on how well you execute our strategy. However, right, the goal of everything that we do is based around this idea of R multiple. And at the end of the day, you should just be aiming to risk 1 in order to make 2, at least, right? And for us, we visualize that through our R multiple. Right? So let's take a look at an example here. Let's say, for example, you were looking to go long on the SPY, and at this point in time, the SPY was trading at 375, right? If you go long at 375 with a stop loss at 374 and a target of 377, in this example here, right, you are risking $1, right? AKA, if the trade goes wrong and against you and you stop out, you'll lose $1, you'll be wrong. Boom. Right? No harm, no foul, right? If the trade works, you're aiming for a 2R multiple, right? Your target is up there at 377. You would be aiming to make $2, right? So if the trade works, you make $2. If the trade loses, trade fails, you lose $1. That ultimately leaves you with a planned R multiple of 2.8, right? Again, not reinventing the wheel here, and I'm not trying to act like I am or teach you anything new, trying to just establish some framework as for a definition of a planned R multiple. Right? This is our definition of a planned R multiple. That's the first type of R multiple, and often it's the only type that people talk about, right? Is the planned R multiple, right? So let's run through a very quick example here just to show me that everybody's following along with this concept. Usually this clicks with everybody, and if it doesn't click with you right away, it usually is because you did a little bit of math wrong and you forgot how to do some equations. And then that very rudimentary math hits your head, and then you get it right in just a second. But let's say you go long at 375, you have a stop loss at 370, aka you are risking $5. On this trade, you are targeting 400, which means that your target is $25 away. What would our planned R multiple be in this equation? Give me some answers there in the chat. I haven't checked it yet, but let me see like 10 or 20 pop up. Boom. Right? So some guesses there, 4 to 1, 5 to 1. Again, that's what I was saying, just that math, that rudimentary math that you might be like, shoot, I got the equation wrong. I promise you, it's not a difficult concept, right? In this example here, we're risking $5. Our target was $25 away. That means if our trade went right and followed our plan, the planned R multiple is 5 to 1 or 5R trade, right? That's what we're looking at if the plan goes right, right? So the next element of R multiple that we look to analyze that is sometimes talked about, but not always actually, surprisingly, which it really should be always talked about at least, is realized R multiple, right? So first, let's say you go long at 375 and you have a stop loss at 370 with a target at 400. The same setup on this trade that we just went through a second ago, right? Now, let's say that trade happens. You enter the trade, you watch your P&L, you're up 20%. In whatever reason you sell when the SPY is at 377.5. What would that leave you with as a realized R multiple? 0.5. The correct answer is 0.5. Right? The correct answer is 0.5. Reason being, right, is that you have a stop loss of $5 and you actually took profit when you were up $2.50, which means that you were risking 1 to make 50 cents. Do we ever want to be risking 1 to make 50 cents? No, right? Again, not reinventing the wheel here, not claiming to, right? However, this gives us 2 very clear definitions, right? There's a bug on my screen. Man, bugs be wilding out today. First, this gives us two very clear definitions, right? We have the first definition, which is our planned R multiple, right? This is the R multiple that you plan prior to entering the trade. Most educators, whatever level of qualification they have, will teach you about this, right? Second definition that we have is realized R multiple, right? Which means after you've closed the trade, you have to go back and journal and track, okay, what was the actual realized R multiple that I had on this trade? What was the return that I captured based on the original stop loss I had, assuming you would have followed it, and where you actually exited the position and where your total profit is, right? Good educators will also teach you that. Not all of them will, because not everyone's a good educator, but if you've worked with a good experienced educator in the past, they will teach you to calculate realized R multiple as well. Now, here's where I believe the disconnect is and where I believe most educators are lacking when it comes to R multiple, right? The reality is that your R multiple is not a static thing. When you're in the trade, right? When you are in the trade and as it's occurring, your R multiple is not 5 to 1 the entire time. It's moving, right? It's shifting because the chart is shifting. The chart is giving us new technical information that we are using, such as a new place to trail our trade based on a stop loss, right? Based on the chart. Okay, how do I move up my stop loss? Spoiler, the video that I recorded on Monday that you all will get access to on next Thursday specifically covers this. Not that we're not going to cover it, but it shows a real-time example of it, right? But it talks and really exemplifies, right, how trades are dynamic. Your R multiple is not going to be the same thing at all points in time. And so if we know that, right, if we know that piece of information, right, then we then have to introduce a brand new definition of R multiple as a whole, right? So the third definition of R multiple that we have is something that I don't know if I coined it, but I don't know. Dynamic R, honestly, I don't know if I had heard that from anybody else before. Even my previous mentors. I don't know. I might have, but nonetheless, dynamic R is a concept that's very rarely talked about within the trading community, right? It's very rarely talked about within the trading community. And that's where I believe there's a big lapse, right? So now let's run through this trade example again. You enter a trade at 375 with a stop loss at 370. Your target is 400. You have a planned R multiple in that situation of 5 to 1. We've talked about that already. Everybody should be on the same page about that, right? Now, let's say the trade actually starts working, right? It starts occurring and taking place and happening and working, and things start going and moving and so on and so forth, right? And all of a sudden, the SPY gets to 390. And you're like, oh, shit, this is actually working in my favor, right? This is actually working in my favor. This is actually something that can be added. My trade is working, right? So first, before we go on to this example here, I want to just define something with this example, right? Let's say, actually, no, I gotta stick to my thing so I don't confuse myself. Okay, never mind. Pause. Resume. Okay, so you went long at 375, the target's 400, the trade actually starts working, right? And the SPY gets to 390, right? Now, based on the chart, on things that you're going to learn in the next several lessons, you raise your stop loss to 380, right? That's what the chart is telling you to do. So now all of a sudden, your target's 400, your stop loss is 380. What is your dynamic R multiple? Dynamic R is 3R, someone's saying? 4.0. Give me more guesses. I want more guesses, even if you think the person above you is right. Okay, this is good. This is why I'm glad we're having this conversation, right? There were several people in there who were putting 3 to 1. There were several people in there who were putting different answers, right? The reality is that this point in time, right, the trade has worked in your favor, right? And you, assuming you haven't sold any for profit, but even if you have, right, if you have sold some for profit, your end game R multiple will be different. But this new dynamic R multiple is new completely from that original trade, right? So for those of you who said 1.0, you are correct, right? So let's say, for example, just to put some dollars behind this to make it make a little bit more sense, let's say the target has got 400, right? You are now up. You are now at the SPY is now trading at 390, right? Your new stop loss is at 380, and your target is 400, right? So you're up $500 on this trade as it's currently constructed, right? But with this new information here on where your target is and where your new stop loss is, all of a sudden your dynamic R multiple, right, is now just a 1-to-1. If you were to hold to your target, you might either make another 250 or you'd lose another 250. So essentially, if you went back here, right, and you asked yourself the question, right, okay, Jake, let's look at this first plan trade, right? Let's look at this first plan. Someone's raised their hand. Whoever raised their hand, we don't pause the meetings during this. If you didn't watch the kickoff, I'm going to do it. We have two people on it. I believe it's Ali and Jordan who normally rock this lesson. They'll be able to answer any questions exactly as the way I would, or I'll be able to help answer in the Discord afterwards. But right, let's just look at this from a different lens really quickly. This very first trade, right, the plan trade, this first example from this slide, the plan trade, long 375, stop loss 370, target 400. Right, that has a planned R multiple of 5-to-1. Are you interested in that trade? Does a 5-to-1 R multiple get you interested? Give me some answers. Give me some answers. Yeah. Right? Yeah. 5-to-1 is definitely appealing. I don't know about you, but I'd love to risk $1 to make 5. That sounds friggin' great, dog. I would love that. Now, let's say that you don't actually take this trade, right? But your buddy sitting right next to you does. Your buddy takes that trade, and next thing you know, this is the new current construction of the trade. She's crushing it. She's up. It's at 390. Her stop loss is 380. The target's 400. You sitting next to her, having not taken the trade, right? Are you going to be entering this one as a new trade right here, right now? Are we interested in entering a trade that's constructed like this? Target 400, stop loss 380, current price 390. Are we interested in that? No, right? That's not of interest to us, right? So that's why it's this important distinction where even though you're up on that trade, you don't want to be thinking about it like you are up on that trade. AKA, you don't want to be thinking about it like it's just my profit. How many times have you thought that and given back all of your profit, right? Instead, the way that you want to be thinking about it is, okay, what is my dynamic R? AKA, right? If Sally was sitting here next to me and Sally skipped that trade, would she still be interested in taking this new trade, right? It's a valid question, right? So let's ask ourselves another question here. I love this partial lesson. This is why I know this lesson, some people, it's repetitive information in terms of risk management to some who have a ton of experience, right? But I promise you, I like to believe that I teach it in a far different way than it's taught before, right? So let's examine this again. Same situation occurs, right? You're long 375. You have that planned 5-to-1 R multiple. The trade works, and this is your new dynamic R to R, 1-to-1. I think everybody should be on the same page as to why that is the case. And if not, I promise you, this isn't a crazy, this will click. This isn't something like, this will click. Don't worry. Like, I promise you, it's a straightforward idea, right? So you're at $500 on that trade. There's 250 till your new stop loss. There's 250 till your target, right? If you are in a trade that had a planned 5-to-1 R multiple, right? And all of a sudden, your new R multiple, right? This math doesn't really work because technically, based on how much you're up, you should be up more than that and be risking less till the pullback. So ignore the actual dollar values behind it. But if you all of a sudden are in a trade that was a potential 5R trade, and all of a sudden your dynamic R is 1-to-1, right? Are you instantly selling right away? Are you automatically getting out of the position? Are you fingering, yes, I'm out, 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 I'm out. Is that what you're doing? And I'm genuinely asking because everybody's answers are going to be different, and there isn't necessarily a right answer for this question, right? First two people said no. Emotionally, probably yes. That's P&L watching, no. No, holding, depends on the chart. Personally, unfortunately, yes. Right? So good. So there's a variety of different answers there, right? And I think that there's the reason the variety of different answers is that it would come down to you as a person, right? If you're the type of person that watching that profit is going to put you on risk of going on tilt, right? And making it come back a little bit, go put you at risk of going tilt, then yeah, maybe, you know, I would be a little bit quicker to sell. If you're somebody who can handle that emotionally and not too long, would be. For me personally, the answer is I'm not exiting right away, right? However, if it gets to a 1-to-1 dynamic R and all of a sudden I haven't locked any profit and something on the chart happens where it starts to go against me, I'm probably going to get out of the way relatively quickly, right? And just take my profit, because at that point, it's no longer mathematically in my favor, right? To be in this trade and holding it as much as I possibly can, right? So as I was going through the responses, I saw one person that sounded like they were I don't know for sure if this is what I saw, but just on a glance, it sounded like saw one person that was showing, if this concept is really like not clicking in your brain yet, which again, I promise you, this is not the most confusing one. It'll like, just make the support ticket in Discord and I'll come back to you afterwards. And I will, don't worry, nobody gets left behind. I promise you on that. This isn't something to leave behind, right? But this is a concept of dynamic R where it starts to ask the question, one of the most popular questions that I get asked, and one of the most popular reasons that people take this program, pause. I love doing that, is because people ask, Jake, how do you hold trades for so long, right? How do you hold your winners? How do you hold them till these targets? How do you do this, right? And a big portion of that answer is that I am constantly examining my dynamic R multiple, right? I am constantly paying attention to a dynamic R multiple, right? So this is an example of dynamic R multiple. Let's run through one more, and then later tonight, we're also going to run through one on the chart, right? So first, right? Let's say that you were long at 375, right? Same exact trade, stop loss 270, right? Now let's say that the trade has worked in your favor, right? And all of a sudden you're actually at 398, right? You're at 398 and your new stop loss is 394. You're up 450 bucks, so close to this goal that you have, which we're going to slam down the idea of goals later, but so close to this goal you have of 500, right? In this equation here, with a target of 400, a current price of 398 and a new stop loss of 394, what is your dynamic R multiple, right? This is just a follow-up, making sure that we're all on the same page, right? 0.5, take time to TP. Got a couple of answers there, correct. At that point in time, right, you are $2 away from your target and you're $4 away from your stop loss. So at that point in time, you are risking $100 to make $50. If you're in that trade and you realize your R multiple is 0.5 R, are you instantly selling? Let's get like 10, 15, 20 answers. Are you instantly selling? Yes or no? Yes, right? Absolutely, right? Yes, probably. There shouldn't be a probably on this one, truthfully, right? I would say that if your dynamic R gets to 0.5 R, right, at that point, I would personally close the trade completely, because it's not worth, like, at that point, you have to ask yourself the question, is it worth risking 100 to make that extra 50, right? Because what else you can do is just exit, take a step back, wait for the next buy setup or sell setup and see if there's a new entry or new trade on that as a whole. But if your dynamic R multiple has shifted to below 0.50 or below, I feel confident in saying, yes, that's a trade where I would pull trigger and exit relatively quickly, right? I would look to get out of the way on that, right? That's where I kind of stand, right? So the reality is that dynamic R multiple kind of represents this concept that as the trade works in your favor, risk reward starts to shift against you, right? So at some points, like that example we just talked about, you are actually risking more to stay in that trade than you are to just exit it, right? When you reach that point, it's like reaching a saturation point, right? When you reach that point, you got to get out, right? Because at that point, it no longer makes sense to you from a risk reward perspective, from an R multiples perspective, right? It no longer makes sense for you to stay in that in order to hold that trade, right? So our goal as traders, right, is to be constantly examining our R multiples, to be ensuring that the trade is worth our time, right? Let me give you a little bit of knowledge right now, my friends. The minute that you start day trading, your time suddenly has value on it. Whether you're making money or not, you are learning a lifelong skill and putting value on your time, right? So the biggest reason why you don't want to be holding a trade that has a 0.5 R multiple is because it's not worth your time, right? Anything under 1 is not like, oh my God, anything under 1 R, I'm grossed out at. Oh, anything under 2, I like don't get out of bed for. It's not worth it for me. I'll just find something that has better. Right. So as traders, our goal is to constantly be examining our multiple, and that includes trades as they are occurring, right? As the trade is actually happening, right? So the truth about trading is that the best of the best traders out there are masters of R multiple. Every single one of your favorite traders out there that is actually making money out there is a R multiple master, right? That's the reality of trading, is that they have figured out how to make more and lose less, right? It's how to figure out this idea that, okay, on every single trade, I need to actually be making 2.5x what I'm risking, right? If you can't figure out that exact concept, right? And then how to execute that concept, aka a strategy, and then how to actually properly do that concept, like a psychology strategy, right? That is where people start to lose their ground as a trader, right? So you got to aim for at least 2.5 to 1 R on all trades, right? Anything below 2.5 to 1 is a B setup at best, right? This is another very important part of this conversation, because people all the time ask me, Jake, what's your A plus setup? Jake, what's your A plus setup? Jake, what's your A plus setup? And there are some of you out there who are like, Jake, just get to the damn charts already so that we can learn your A plus setup. Well, my friends, if we did that, I wouldn't have the chance to explain to you that my A plus setup also includes my R multiple, right? For me, in order to determine whether something is an A plus setup or an A plus plus or A minus B, whatever scale you want to grade it on, right? Which then helps determine your position size as you get more and more position capital to trade with, right? Is your R multiple. So anything below 2.5 to me is a B setup at best. And B setups are like, oh my God, I'm sorry. It was a B setup and I knocked out, right? Like I'm not that interested. I don't really care, right? Like, it's like, I know that I know what to do when A plus setups and A setups come. We know how to find them. So Bs are like, ugh, so boring. If I'm trading a B plus setup or a B or below setup, anything under 2.5 to 1 R, I'm using smaller size, because even if I win, I'm not going to make that much. It's a B setup. I'm going to make 2.5 hours. I'm risking $1,000. I'm going to make 2,500. That's cool, but that's like, or I'm going to make I'm risking 1,000. I'm going to make 2,000. That's cool, but that's like, and don't get me wrong, I am definitely not knocking 2R trades. However, I'm just saying those are like, when you're using your scale, don't underestimate the power of locking consistent trades. I'm never saying anything like that. However, what I am saying though is that when you're defining what is an A plus setup, a 2R realized R multiple or planned R multiple is not going to be part of the equation of an A plus setup, right? For me, the best trades offer, and I'm going to change this, for R multiples of 4 to 1. If you can get a 4 to 1, because that in reality means that you're risking, right, $1 to make 4. Essentially, you're risking $25 to make 100, right? It's like the quarter system, right? And that is a massive W, right? So in this example here, your long SPY at 372, your stop loss is 371, your take profit is 374. This would mean that you're risking $1 to make 2. That, in my opinion, would leave you with a 2 to 1 R to R setup. So even if you have the best chart in the world, aka we go through the next 3 lessons, you learn about trend analysis, candle analysis, multi-time frame analysis, level analysis, and you're like, oh my gosh, Jake, I found the best setup ever. I want to DM it to you. It's so good. The chart is amazing. And then I respond to you and I say, okay, what about the entry? What was the R? And you say it's a 2 to 1. I'm going to leave you on read like, sir, ma'am, you just say that was an A plus plus with a 2 to 1, right? Like, for me, a 2 to 1 R to R is a B setup at best, right? If it's 2 to 1 planned, maybe sometimes you realize 2R because you planned for 3 or 4 and shit happened, right? Nothing like that, but I'm talking about your planned R multiple. Remember, we have different R multiple types. Your planned R multiple being 2 to 1 is a B at best, right? If you have a 1 to 1 R multiple, in my opinion, that would be a D setup at best. 1 to 1 is like, well, baby, what is you doing? We don't have interest in that. And I'm clear, I understand that you are all clear on that based on previous answers of yes, 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 or excuse me, no, 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 no in the chat when I said, would you take that trade? Right? So the reality is that anything below 2.5 to 1 is a B setup at best, right? I'm going to say anything below 2 to 1 is a B setup at best. 2.5, I'm okay with a little bit better. Anything below 2 to 1 is a B setup at best. The best trades offer R multiples of 4 to 1s and the ones that will really make your year. Here's the reality of trading as a whole, right? I've used this analogy before. Other people I've been on podcasts with have used this analogy before, but trading is much like luxury shopping and luxury, like all that stuff. The reality is most of those brands, they make 80% of their money from 20% of their clients. Traders is the exact same way. At the end of the year, 80% of my profits or 70% of my profits are probably going to come from like 30%, 20 or 30% of my trading days, but very small amount, right? So the bulk of the profits that most people have at the end of the year, especially because you can have consistent wins all year long, but your big wins often will carry you, right? So the best of the best trades are going to be ones where you could potentially make a 10R multiple on your trade, right? So these would be examples of finding a trade where it's like SPY 372, your stop loss is 371.5, your target's 377, right? And if the trade works, right, you could be making 10x what you're risking. Now, our system does allow for this type of R multiple return trades. They don't come very often and all the time, but they are there. And truth be told, the CRM loss that I took on Monday was like a 20, I think when I finally got out of it, it was like a 23, 24, $25,000 loss. Might have been even a little bit higher. But that for me was like pretty much the max risk that I was willing to take, because for me, the chart was an A plus and the potential R multiple was like 7 to 1. If we had hit targets at 231, right, I would have made like over 150, 200K, right, which would have resulted in the R multiple. So for me, that was like the definition of what was an A setup, so to speak, right? And so in order to define that A setup, part of it comes from the chart and part of it comes from the R multiple itself, right? So I know I just spent like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, even I was like 30 minutes on R multiple. It's for a reason, right? This is the it factor. R multiple is that guy. When you're asking the question, like, are you that guy, pal? You're not that guy, pal. R multiple is that guy. Yeah, trading psychology is super important. Yes, your strategy is incredibly important, and both of those will play a role in constructing your R multiple. However, without a very clear and definitive, massively defined understanding of R multiple, right, you will not succeed as a trader, right? You just won't. Right? So there's a reason that I harp on it for so long. It's because I want everyone to be picture clear on it. Right? And we will continue to evolve on this topic as we get deeper and deeper into the program as a whole. Right? So with that, that is honestly, I think, the longest I've ever ranted on R multiple. We're at 5:44. This is a good time. I need a new LaCroix anyways. Let's go take a pee and water break. Let's be back. Last time I did this, someone actually messaged me and they're like, hey, the water break was really fast. I wasn't back yet. So we're going to take like 2 or 3 minutes. We're going to pause. We're going to come back. We still have a lot to cover tonight. So we're not done. It's not coming back in then 10 more minutes by any means. We got she thick. So everybody, BRB, get some water, get some restroom, and we'll be back. All right. All righty. Welcome back, everybody. All righty. Let's get back into rhythm here. But first, limoncello LaCroix. Ooh. Here comes the burp. If you don't want me at my best when I'm teaching, you got to be able to handle me at my worst when I'm burping LaCroix, baby. All right, so we have just spent a significant amount of time talking about R multiple, right? And I've explained why I think this is extremely crucial for your success as a trader, right? However, R multiple is definitely not the only topic of conversation when it comes to risk as a whole, right? Now, one of the biggest things that people are confused on when it comes to risk management is the various definitions between capital usage versus risk, right? So it's very important for us that we talk about this, right? And explain the specific factors, right? Between capital usage versus risk, right? So first, let's say, for example, to define capital usage, that you went long with 100 shares of Tesla at $1,000 per share with a stop loss at 990, right? 100 shares at $1,000 per share requires $100,000 of capital, right? Bear with me. I know these are large numbers, but it just makes math easy, right? Now, in this particular example, let's talk about how important capital usage is in terms of your particular accounts, right? So if you came to me and you were like, yo, Jake, I want to go long on Tesla shares intraday only. So there's no risk of bad news overnight, no risk of a gap down, no risk of my stop loss not triggering. I want to go long on shares intraday with a stop loss. I want to buy 100 shares of Tesla. I have $100,000 of my account, essentially saying that I would be using 100% of my account in one trade. What do you think my reaction to that would be? Let me get 5, 10 answers in here. Fuck. All right. No dummy, freak out, horrified. What the fuck? Not good. Many of you are right. My first instinct naturally would be like, yo, that's not good. However, that isn't necessarily what my first question would be, right? My first question would be, well, what's the trade plan, right? What's the trade thesis? What's the R multiple? What's the plan, right? Again, remember, this is shares, not options, right? Which are way more volatile. This is shares, and we've already said that we're assuming no overnight holds, which means there's no gap risk, and that you have a stop loss that will trigger intraday. So you actually have defined risk on this trade, right? So if a student came to me and they said, hey, why is my thing not working? There we go. Oops. Right? And if they came to me and they said that, okay, they were doing 100 shares of Tesla at $1,000 per share with a stop loss at 990 with $1,000 of risk on the trade, aka they were risking 1% of their account, right? And aiming to make 4%, right? All of a sudden, that's a whole different equation, right? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, you're aiming to make 4%, you're risking 1%, right? Now, do I ever advocate for 100% of your account in one position, whether it's shares, which are relatively safe, or options? No, of course not. I'm not going to advocate for 100% position. But the point of that whole exercise is to teach you all that the first question that you should be asking isn't what the capital usage is, it is what is the risk, right? That's the biggest priority that we have. Remember, my question to you all was, what would my first reaction be? And my first reaction would be, what's the risk, right? What is your planned risk on that trade, right? So again, of course, I'm not advocating for anybody to use 100% of your account in shares in one trade, right? But let's say you had a $200,000 account, right? And all of a sudden, this becomes, right? All of a sudden, this becomes 0.5% of your account risk, aiming to make 2% of your account. Even though you still have 50% of your buying power in that shares position, right? You're actually only risking half of 1% of your account, right? So it's a very important distinguishing factor to ask ourselves the question, okay, how much capital am I using on this trade versus how much am I actually risking on this trade, right? Now, the most important part about all of this is remaining disciplined, right? Because you can ultimately find situations where you could use 25% of your account or your buying power in one trade and still have a stop loss of like 2%, right? Based on the chart, it's going to have to be a very tight stop and a very nice chart, but that's possible, right? There's going to be opportunities in your career on a daily basis where you see chances to put in a higher percentage of your capital, right? Even though you're trying to keep your risk low, right? But what that really comes down to is remaining disciplined, right? Like you have to actually stay disciplined and follow that stop. Otherwise, it's meaningless, right? So there are two important things to take away from this slide: capital usage and risk. But above all else, the most important takeaway is that remaining disciplined remains paramount above both of those things, right? Right. So again, let's say you're looking at something with somebody who's trading a 10K account, right? If you're somebody who's trading a 10K account and you use a 2K position size, which is 20% of your buying power, historically, people are going to say, damn, that's a lot. And they're not wrong. That is a lot of buying power to be using on one particular trade. But if you have a $200 stop loss, aka in that particular position, it would be a 10% stop, right? In reality, you're only actually risking 2% of your account. So that's the key distinguishing factor. 10K account, if you're using a 2K position size, you have 20% capital usage, but 2% account risk. Does that make sense to everybody? Just give me some yeses in the chat. Again, this is not for Instagram. This is just for me and my brain, right? Give me a bunch of yeses, right? Right? And that's a very important concept because for us and how I manage risk, it's one of the things that gives me a massive edge to scaling my account in a quicker manner, right, than many people look to do, right? Now, it might be more aggressive. However, oftentimes I'm able to find these opportunities where you can use higher capital risk because you have stop losses using our system that are nice and tight, right? Even the person who is on tonight, my man Mullet, who I know is a relatively conservative trader, he's one of the most disciplined people I know. You look at him and his stop losses are oftentimes 10, 15%, right? And I'm not saying that on those trades to go heavy, but I'm just saying that on those where you have a 10 to 15% stop, right, in a high aiming R multiple, right, that is where you can really potentially have these bigger winning days, right? So in reality, right, let's say you have a 10K account, one or two more examples of this, right? Well, I think it's just this one. 10K account, 1.5K position size, meaning that you are using 15% of your account, right? And you have a $300 stop loss, meaning you are risking 3% of your account in terms of actual risk, right? So again, like we talked about, the real risk here is not the 3% of account, right? 3% of your account on one individual given trade, depending on your risk aversion levels, is fine. In my books, 3% on a trade is fine. They're on that, the way that I measure, especially with my withdrawal system, right? 3%, it's high, but it's fine, right? It's definitely on the higher end, right? But the real danger isn't losing that 3%. The real danger is dealing with loss aversion, right? Where you have a planned stop of 3%, and all of a sudden, rather than following your stop loss, right, you have this loss aversion where you refuse to admit you're wrong, you double down on the position, and then you refuse to admit you're wrong again, and next thing you know, it goes to zero. Next thing you know, you lost $3,000 of your $10,000 account, and you're like, wait, what just happened? I thought I was risking $300. Like, what? Right? So there is, again, it's very important for us to define with the system that I use, capital usage versus risk versus the real danger, which is loss aversion, leading us back to that paramount factor that remaining disciplined is the most important above all else, right? Now, here is how I specifically manage my account. And these numbers may seem big, but in the next slide, we're going to take these numbers down a notch to make them a little bit more reasonable and provide a potential path for you all. So I have scaled up my account a little bit, but I still use this as my example just because the math is easier, right? So for me, I keep my real net liquidating value, aka the cash in my account, between $30,000 to $50,000, right? However, in my head and in my bank account, right, I am actually basing my risk management off of a $200,000 account, right? So let's say that I enter a trade and I risk 1%. That 1% risk is going to come from the 200K that I am judging my account based off of. Right? Now, here's the key to this. Right? I had a few students before who have come to me after taking the program saying that they were using this same strategy and system where they were treating their $1,000 or $2,000 account like it was 10,000. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Do you actually have the 10,000 in the bank though? And they're like, oh no. And I'm like, well, it doesn't work like that, right? You actually have to do that. So for me, the reason I do this, right, is I like to keep a certain amount in my account and a certain amount, so to speak, in my bank and in my head of what I'm basing my risk off of, right? So for me personally, given that I have withdrawn 5x my account several times over the course of my trading career, I'm okay risking about 10% of my account, 5 to 10% of my account on a max risk type of trade. So for me, 10% is the A+++ number, right? If it's a great trade, for example, CRM was a great trade. Like I mentioned, I scaled up my account a little bit, so it's a little more than 10% of 200. But for me, CRM was an A++. It was very good. It was what I was looking at, right? So I was willing to risk about $30,000, $20,000 to $30,000 in case that trade went wrong, right? Knowing in my head that I was trying to make 50% of my account, 60% of my account, whatever the case may be. So again, this number is arbitrary. We're going to talk about this in our coming slides where I give you specific general account risk management rules. But for me, I personally am comfortable risking at max on A+ setups 5 to 10%. Vast majority of my trades are closer to the 1 to 2 to 3 to 4% per risk type of trade, right? Now, the biggest question people ask is, Jake, why don't you just keep all 200K in the account, right? The reason people ask that is because when I share profit and loss pictures, it has crazy percentages sometimes. People are like, oh my God, you take so much risk. I'm like, no, I actually take less risk, in my opinion. Because what I do is I like to ask myself the question, right? First, let me ask you all a question. And I know the answer is going to be yes, but humor me. For those of you who have traded, how many times have you entered a trade and it goes wrong and then you average down? Even though you say you're not going to. And then you average down again. And then the next thing you know, you've averaged down 7 times on one trade. And 80% of your account is in that trade. Haven't everybody, right? The problem for me is that I found that that was something that was still a threat, even as I continued to scale my account, right? Especially as I continue to have more and more income. It was a threat to me mentally that I would just refuse to admit that I was wrong. So I asked myself the question, what's more dangerous, right? Me in the threat of oversizing on a 200K account, or me having a 40K account and what might feel like oversizing because I have a lot of that 40K in one trade or at risk that day, right? What's more dangerous? And for me, time and time again, the question of what's more dangerous is having more cash in your account. Still on my biggest losing days today, this is the problem, is that it's whenever I have more cash in my account. My theory is that the more cash in your account that you have, the more likely you are to do some dumb shit. Because our brains, no matter how good you are as a trader, no matter how disciplined you are as a human being brains were not designed to trade. We were not designed to deal with the up and down emotions that come with trading, right? And so because of that, we need to find ways in which we can protect times that our brains make decisions without us, right? And one way that I have found to do that is by keeping less money in my account than I'm actually comfortable trading with, right? So the worst case scenario, let's say I go through one of those bad days, I blow my entire account, I lose the entire 40K, right? Which has happened to me over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. That's happened, right? Sorry, I'm getting a call. It's my dad. He should know him in class, but I'm just gonna. I always like to just give a second because if it's your parents and then if they say, "Hey, it's an emergency," you want to make sure. Okay. Hi, I'm in class. I gotta go. I can't talk. I love you. She ignored my text and called me again, so I'm sorry. Moving back on, right? For me, the answer is always, if I have more capital in my account, there's more risk on the table. There's more risk at hand, right? So following up from that, right? The most popular question that I get asked in addition to that, right, is say, Jake, if you lose, say 5K or 10K, would you go back and restart at 30K or would you stay at the 25K and build, right? For me, in order to answer that question, I have to ask another question, which is how did I lose the 5K? Did I take 2 trades where I lost 1% on each trade, 2 or 1.2, whatever it is, a little over 1% on each trade, right? And I followed my stops and they happen to fail. If that's the case, I'm probably just going to deposit back. That way I don't feel like I'm chasing or coming from behind because I didn't do anything wrong. The trades didn't work out. I took a loss, part of life. So 'tis life, right? Right. But what about on the flip side of that equation, right? If I was up 10K on the day and then I made a bad decision, I went on tilt, and next thing you know, I'm down 10K, I'm down 5K, or whatever the case is, right? In that situation, no, I'm not going to deposit back and get back to my beginning starting number because I don't feel like I've earned it, right? And in reality, I probably should be taking a day or two off to prevent myself from going on a larger tilt. And so for me, this is how I manage my risk. And those numbers might have seemed a little bit large and out of perspective. So let's bring them down in size a little bit, right? If you are someone that is trading a $10,000 account, here is one way that I would structure your risk instead of trading that $10,000 account. Instead, I would keep about $3,000 or $4,000 in your account, right? And be willing to be more aggressive with that $3,000 or $4,000, basing your risk off of that overall 10K. Right? For me, still based on the way I traded, of course, these numbers are arbitrary. Your max risk is 5 to 10%. Let's call it 5% just to be a little bit more disciplined, right? And again, it's the same question, right? It's the same question that you're asking yourselves. What's more dangerous? You oversizing or averaging down on a 10K account, or you having 4K to average down on during a bad tilt? You never want to plan to tilt, but it's a threat no matter who you are. Right. So for me, this is how I size my account and how I have found success sizing my account this way. Right. That being said, the priority for us, another priority for us on tonight's agenda, is to make sure that we have covered some broad general account risk management rules. Right. Now, we're going to go through this section a little bit quicker just because I have a feeling that account risk management I'm not reinventing the wheel here a little bit. What I just talked about with dynamic R and with how I size my account, the reason I rant on that for a while is because I believe in maybe not reinventing the wheel, but it's new information, right? General risk management is things that it's a system that is really arbitrary and it's up to you, right? It really is up to you, but here are the guidelines that I would put in place, right? For me personally, I would aim to risk 1 to 10% of your account on any individual given trade, right? If the trade goes right, or if the trade, again, that number is arbitrary, right? Some of you may be like, whoa, 10% is way too high. That's fine. Again, the reason my number is 10% is because I've withdrawn so many profits over the time. I withdraw, I don't let it compound, right? If you compound your account, then obviously that number should not be that high, right? But there's the point is you should set a definitive risk that you're willing to account for per individual given trade, right? You will never want to risk more than 10% of your account on one individual given trade. This number will change as your account size increases, right? As you get a bigger account, typically this number goes down a little bit, right? Losing $200 of a $2,000 account is a different beast than losing 100K of $1 million account. You know what I'm saying? So there is times where this number goes down as you scale your accounts, right? Just because of the emotional toll it can have on you as a trader, right? Another rule of my risk management that I will recommend, and we're going to talk about much more in length, is using withdrawals for safety. I'm a big believer, like we just talked about many times, the more money that you have in your account, the more money and more likely you are to do some dumb shit. So in order to protect your profits, I highly recommend that you withdraw at all times. Withdraw. Right? YOLOs or lottos, in my opinion, should be less than 1% of your account. The risk on the trade should be less than 1% of the account. So if you're sized for 0, that means the entire position should be 1% of your account or less. When people talk about risk management, they talk about rules and goals, and setting goals. I hate goals. Maybe you can have like a quarterly goal or like a yearly goal that you'd like to reach, but you don't really care. Goals are bad in trading because it makes it about the money and not about the charts. Our lives need to be about charts, not about the money, right? So in my opinion, you should not have a daily goal, a weekly goal, a monthly goal, because, and again, a little interactive question here, for any of you who have ever traded with a goal before, how many times have you had a $500 goal? You've been up $490. You didn't sell because you wanted to hit 500. And next thing you know, you're red on the day. Insert yes. You don't even have to put them. I know they're coming, right? So for me, it's a very definitive rule. We don't do goals. I don't fuck with goals. If you have found success with it, with having a goal for that day or a number you're happy with or whatever, I'm not going to take that away from you, but I don't like goals, right? Because much like the times that you try to hit your goal and then you end up going red on the day, how many times have you hit a $500 daily goal, sold at $500, and then watched your trade run up and you would have made $2,000 if you had just held instead of selling at your daily goal of 500? Insert yes, right? It sucks on both ends. I don't like goals. So for me, we don't do goals. I don't do goals. That's the way that I operate, right? Going right in hand with that is that knowing when to walk away. That's the one thing that people who defend goals, they're like, Jake, when I hit my goal, I know when to walk away for the day, right? I'm like, for me, I base my decision factor of knowing when to walk away for the day on the charts. Right? On what are the chart opportunities providing me and where is my mentals at, right? Am I in a good mental headspace to be trading right now? Last note here is that I highly recommend using separate accounts as a trader, right? So if you're somebody, especially with a small account, if you're looking to swing trade and day trade, if you are under that 25,000 PDT mark, what I would recommend doing is having a separate account that you can swing trade in versus day trade in. That way that you can kind of keep the two clear and separate and they will not impact you on each other. Because how many times have you opened up red from a swing trade and then gone on tilt because you wanted to make it back? Yes. Way to prevent that is by having separate accounts, right? So one of the things that I always promise throughout this program is that I like to build an ideal path for you all as traders starting out with a $2,000 account. Now, Jake, why do we use $2,000 as that number? It seems arbitrary because when I finally stopped losing money as a trader, when I finally just stopped burning money, it was when I started trading around a $2,000 account as opposed to saving up and trying to deposit more and more and more. I said, okay, I'm going to take it with these $2,000. I'm going to figure it out. And each week, I'm going to withdraw. The man named Kansas City Shuffle taught me that, hey, these profits ain't profits till you hit your bank. So I said, okay, I'm going to start with $2,000 and I'm going to withdraw, right? Way back in the day, right? This is one of the very first things. Honestly, now that I think about it, I believe that was one of his probably first 2 or 3 things he ever taught me when I first met him, which was I want to say early 2019. He's this redneck I love him so much. But from North Carolina, and he's just like, profits ain't profits till they hit your fucking bank, right? And I was like, oh shit. So finally, I didn't actually, until a little while after, realize that, okay, I need to start enacting it. So I traded a $2,000 account, and every time at the end of the week or end of the day when I was over that, I would withdraw some of that money, right? So for me, if this $2,000 account, here is how I want you to structure it within your trading. First, I would like you to have a typical capital usage, right? AKA on each individual given trade, this is about how much of your account you can expect to use per trade, right? And again, just for some clarification, let me pause because sometimes people get confused, right? This right here is a method that I showed you as if like you had 10K in your head, but you were really just trading with 2K, right? Right now, I'm going through this as if you're actually keeping your full amount in your account, right? Because I want to give you some guidelines, right? So whatever it is, whether you're keeping the amount in there or not, right? This is based off of that amount. So whether you're only keeping $500 in there because you're following this method, or whether you're keeping the full 2,000 in there, we're using $2,000 as our base number, bank number, right? So for me, that would be typical capital usage of like $200 to $300. Right? From there, I would like you to have a max positional loss of around $30 to $60, right? So this means you're risking about 1.5 to 3% of your account on any individual given trade, right? Now, your max daily loss, which sometimes would come from one trade, would be about $100, aka 5% of your account, right? Ideally, I would like you to be trading contracts, of course, 2.0 or under, so that you can follow the capital usage rule, right? However, I encourage you to aim for contracts more in the 0.60 to 120 region. That way you can trade two of them. It's very nice to trade two contracts. I actually would not take an options trade with just one contract most of the time. I would always find a way to try and take two if you can, right? That being said, with these rules, you can actually expect to make some decent money, right? Now, you do have to keep reasonable expectations, because should you be expecting to make $500 per day using these rules? No, absolutely not. However, it is very reasonable to look for an average profit, not a goal, but an average profit when you simply do the math on your days, right? Of around 50 to $100. If you're risking 30 to 60, right? Making 60 to 120 is reasonable, right? That's reasonable. That would be 2-hour trades on each of them, right? That's a very reasonable goal with a $2,000 account, right? Which sounds mathematically crazy because you'd be making like 5% of your account, 7% of your account per day. And the way that can compound is nuts. Yeah, that's why trading's so hard, because that's actually possible. Why is it so hard? Because you can do this. Like, this is a possible thing. And this is crazy. The math is crazy. So why is it so hard? Because the math is crazy. Like, it's crazy, right? So my recommendation to you in terms of withdrawals would be to withdraw about 70 to 80% of your profits, right? Now, the frequency of withdrawals is up to the trader, right? For me personally, it varies. Some days I'll withdraw every single day. Some days I'll wait till the end of the week to withdraw, right? But the frequency and the power of withdrawals, what it really comes down to is fighting this urge to size up. One of the things that I struggled with so much as a trader would be taking $2,000 and I could turn it into $3,000. But every time I got to $3,000, I would drop back down to $2,000 because I'd trade a little bit bigger size, right? And then I could get it back up, and then I'd drop back down. And I get back up, and I drop back down. It's this hurdle, right? And then one day it hit me. I was like, oh my God. Kansas City, this guy told me this one time. What if I just withdraw and start over at 2,000 again? Because I've done 2,000 to 3,000 100 times. But then I get to 3,000 and I size up and I lose it all, right? So instead, withdraw most of that, right? And keep it in your bank. That way, if you ever have a bad day, a bad week, you can just deposit your profits back. There's no law saying you can't deposit profits back. I do it all the time. It's part of trading. You lose, you win, right? My reason that I withdraw 70 to 80% rather than 100% of my profits, at least when I was in this stage of my trading career, the reason for that is I like to leave myself a buffer. Let's say you start with $2,000 and you end the week at $2,500. You're feeling good. You're about to take a withdrawal. Instead of withdrawing that entire $500 and next week starting over at $2,000, withdraw $400. Leave yourself $100 in there. That way on Monday, you have one free trade, so to speak. Right? Where if you get stopped out and lose that max loss of 5% of your account, right? You're still starting at your normal baseline. And mentally, it doesn't feel like you're down, right? I like to use that little bit as a buffer for me to continue to take risks. And I will actually start to do that intra-week as well, right? So let's say there's sometimes where I'm having a good week. I'm up, let's say for keep numbers more reasonable, I'm up $4,000 on the week, right? Or $5,000 on the week. Sometimes what I will do is say, okay, right? Now I'm going to be basing my risk off of my profits. So sometimes I feel comfortable saying that, okay, rather than risking the normal, $750 per trade that I do, I will risk $1,000 on this trade because I have a little bit of that profit to buff it, right? But it's all then still on the same percentage. It's a tight this, right? And it's all very systemic, right? But I highly, highly encourage you to withdraw most of your profits and then use what you don't withdraw as a little bit of a buffer to help you scale, right? So again, 200K account, these are the rules that I would have, right? And I will add a few extra rules down here, right? If you have a $2,000 account, and that's what you're basing it off, whether that's in your head or actually in the account, you're basing your risk off of that. I would try to use the maximum buying power in a day of 1,500, right? I would try to train your brain to try and leave some buying power in there if you can. Now, I personally really struggled with leaving buying power available. In my head, the way that my brain would work is I was like, oh, I have more buying power. I can take another trade. I can make more money, right? And what I found, and especially that I found this during a specific very large run of mine in 2021, was that would hurt me. So instead, what I would do, and it's a hack, but it's a hack that works for me, and it's not a lifelong solution, but it's a Band-Aid solution for you to help get over discipline problems early on and train your brain, right? Is you can go 2 or 3 weeks out in expiration, look at a SPY at the money contract that's going to have a very tight spread, right? You can buy it and immediately sell it for a loss of $1 or $2. That's it, right? Next thing you know, right, you barely lost any money, right? Or you made $1 or you lost $1. But what you've done is essentially locked that buying power up. It's locked up. You can't reach it anymore, right? You can't utilize it anymore, and it's no longer at risk, right? So that is a SPY hack that I personally like to use as you develop the consistency that I want you all to get to as you get more and more screen time, right? So with that, in addition to the $2,000 accounts, one of the things that we always like to do, and Ali will be on here to help direct you to where you can find the small account watch list within the Discord, right? But if you're looking to find contracts within that $60 to $120 range, I would encourage you to not look for more out of the money contracts. I would encourage you to just look and trade cheaper names, right? So Apple's no longer really a cheap tech stock name, but you could do something like AMD, Snapchat. Banks, there's JPM, BAC, Morgan Stanley. Industrials, there's CAT, there's Boeing, right? Although CAT's a little bit more expensive now. Miscellaneous, there's RCL, Plug, XOM. You have SBucks with Jordan Mullet nailed today, right? The indexes will usually also have some lower cost options. So I recommend going for names that offer cheaper options, not more out of the money options, right? So with that, my friends, again, my promise to you is that I was going to teach you stuff that I don't teach on YouTube. Any of this out there is not on YouTube, right? Especially the dynamic R, my risk management strategy. That is stuff that I to myself, right? Now, way back in the day, like way back in the day, I did a couple of public webinars where I discussed some things on psychology, right? But I didn't go as super in depth. Right? For me, this is what I created as my anchoring phrases, right? And these anchoring phrases help me find a concrete definition, right? And concrete way to help with my trading psychology, right? Throughout the course of this entire program, I'm going to be dropping trading psychology nuggets for you. Spoiler alert, I dropped several tonight already in the risk management section, right? However, this is the section of the presentation where I would like you to walk away with 6 anchoring phrases that when you are having that internal debate of, oh my gosh, is this the right thing to be doing as a trader? You can use one of these 6 phrases to anchor you and bring you back down to reality so that you don't make a psychological mistake as a trader, right? The first comes from Mark Douglas in this concept of accepting the risk. Now, I won't ask you to put yeses in the chat because I know this is going to be yes for everyone. But the question that this one comes along with is, how many times have you entered a trade with a set stop loss, exited the trade prior to that stop loss hitting, right? But because you were down whatever dollar amount, you got scared and freaked out, you exited the trade, right? And then the trade starts to work. It never hit your original stop loss, but then it starts to work. For us, what we use to define that is the term accepting the risk, right? So what it means is actually relatively straightforward. Determining the risk prior to entering a trade is not complicated. We talked about that in slide 1, Jake. Why are you bringing that back up now, right? Well, talking about it and being about it is very different, right? And so what I need you all to do in order to succeed as a trader with a solid psychological strategy is to, on every single trade that you take, every single one, you fully accept the risk. Meaning, if this trade goes wrong and I get stopped out, right? Or excuse me, if this trade goes wrong, I'm still going to hold, unless something in the chart changes, I'm still going to hold until my planned stop loss. Why? Because I have accepted the risk of that trade, right? It also means when that trade hits that loss, that you are going to be mentally and psychologically okay, right? CRM was an A++ setup. I risked my max risk on an individual given trade on it. I lost on it. Was I still fine afterwards? Yeah, I was totally fine. Why? Because I had accepted the risk. I knew that if that trade went wrong, this is how much I was willing to risk. And if it did, I was cool with that. The biggest thing that people struggle with from a trading psychology perspective is entering a trade, thinking about the potential upside, but not truly accepting the risk. You should enter a trade with a size so that if you get stopped out, it's like, no harm, no foul. What's next, right? You just move on. It's nothing, right? So our first psychology pillar, truly accept the risk. Now, next, our second psychology pillar we have here is called being a good sport. This is one of my favorite analogies of all time. We touched on it briefly in our kickoff webinar, but this is one that I personally created myself. It's not Mark Douglas, anything like that. This is me, Jake Ricci. I thought about trading much like you'll learn in our next lesson. I do a lot of sports, but not a lot, but I do one basketball analogy. It's just one. So if you're not a sports person, don't worry. It's just one. And I explain it really well, right? But any of you who played sports as a child, one of the things that you were most likely taught by whether it be a parent or a coach, whatever the case may be, is to be a good sport. AKA, after you won the soccer game, don't go run up to little Timmy and go, haha, you suck, we won. And after you lose, don't go running up to the ref saying, oh my gosh, you're the worst. You're the reason we lost. I hate you, blah, blah, blah. You want to be a good sport, right? That's really key in trading. After you lose, you need to accept that you took that trade. You had that risk. It was a setup that was valid based on the system we use. It just failed. It's part of life. And you accept that loss if you are a good sport. You don't blame anybody but yourself. You take the loss on the chin and you accept it. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm not talking about blaming a signal, because you're mastermind students. You don't do shit with signals, right? I'm expecting that you don't blame the market. You don't think the market's manipulated, the market's rigged, the market's blah, 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 blah. Nah, fam. You took a trade that lost. Deal with it, right? The more dangerous of the two, though, like we talked about last night, is managing your emotions after a winning trade, right? After a winning trade, it is extremely crucial that you manage your emotions because you don't want to be that person that runs up to little Timmy and says, haha, you guys stinking. We're the best. We're the best ever, right? Because guess what? If you do that as a trader, the next time you do that, you will get slapped in the face and possibly the genitals, right? Like it won't be pretty, right? You are going to get booted, right? Like your market is going to slap you so hard, right? And you're going to take a huge loss, right? The phrase that I really like to use when it comes to winning or losing, but mainly winning as a trader, is act like you have been there before. I watched this TV show called The Challenge. You don't need to know anything about it. However, there's winners and losers. And it's hilarious to me to always see the rookies or younger people on that show who have never played it before. Whenever they win an elimination or an event or whatever, They're cheering and rah, 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 rah. You see a rookie in NFL, we get a touchdown, it's cheering, blah, 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 blah. And then you see somebody who's a champion who comes in and wins an elimination, that comes in and wins the game, right? And you look at them and they're stoic. Yeah, they might celebrate. Yeah, they might fist their pump. They might dance real quick, but they are immediately back to calm mode. Why? Because they've been there before. Winning is what they do. So why should they act so like crazy about it? You won a trade. Sweet. Guess what? You were supposed to. Like, 'tis life, right? Like, act when you win as a trader. You need to act like you have been there before. Doesn't mean you can't be excited for a minute or two. Doesn't mean you can't be like, woo, woo, tie yourself on the back, but then boom, right back to reality, being like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm probably going to win another one tomorrow, as long as I follow my rules, right? So being a good sport and acting like you've been there before is our next psychology pillar, right? Next, we move on to this question of who's the boss. This question originated from one of my mindset mentors, not somebody that I've ever learned anything technical from, but somebody that I have learned a lot of mindset things from, which is this question of who's the boss, right? Trading is a privilege, not a right. You do not wake up with a God-given right or whatever. I'm not even religious, but I always say that a right to trade, right? You don't wake up with a right to trade, right? Like nobody, like it's a privilege that you have. Right? And you have to think about the question. If you ask yourself, if you feel obligated to trade every single day, are you the boss or is the market your boss? And if the answer is, I feel like I have to trade every day, the market's your boss. Like the market won. Like you're back to a 9 to 5. Are you happy? Is that the goal of this? No. Right? So asking yourself the question every single day, is there opportunities that are worth my time? And if not, am I the boss or is the market my boss? It's a very introspective question that just by asking yourself can do significant wonders to your trading, right? Now, next is another one that I originally created, which is this concept of 2 out of 7. I believe that full-time professional traders who actually succeed and make money in the world, which there's much fewer, I believe, than the perception is of them out online, right? Because most traders put on risk every single day. Those who succeed at this long term put on risk 2 out of every 7 trading days, right? And the reason I drew that conclusion of 2 out of 7 was many years of chart time, but also a particular example of this chart. If you look at this chart right here, and again, I know that you don't know exactly what I'm referring to with some of these terminologies yet, but here we have a really strong bullish candle. Candle 1, that's a pretty clear and clean day. I would expect some clean trading action on candle 1. Candle 2 is a gap down and then an inside bar, probably not very clean action. Candle 3 is a gap down that tries higher than another inside bar, probably not very tradable action. Candle 4 is a gap down that gets downside continuation. That's probably pretty tradable action. So far, candles 1 and 4 are tradable action. Candle 5, it's not an inside bar, but it's a gap up in a downtrend, probably not a whole lot to do. Candle 6, I don't know what the hell this thing did. It opened up, then it went higher, then it went lower, and then it went lower first, then higher, then lower again. Probably not a lot of tradable action. Candle 7 is another inside bar. Inside of candle 6 is bullshit. Probably not a lot of tradable action, right? That doesn't mean there's nothing happening on those days. That doesn't mean you won't find what we call a hit and run type of scalp, where you're looking for like a scalp 2R type of trade and then get away from the desk. But in terms of bigger moves and actually putting risk on, that came from 2 out of the 7 trading days. So this is something I always like to ask myself each trading day is today one of those 2 out of 7 based on the information that I have pre-market, right? And some days, guess what, fam? Some days you're going to say, no, I don't think this is one of those 2 out of 7. And it is going to be one of those 2. Part of the game. It's his life, right? I'm going to teach you a system that's very good at identifying those days, but it still happens to me. Happens to me sometimes, right? So it's always going to be a part of the game, right? Next up for this psychology pillars that I like to is this idea of 1% versus 99% and essentially reverse engineering, right? I've talked about this one before on an Instagram reel, but the common statistic you hear is that 99% of day traders fail, right? So for me, rather than try and copy and mimic the 1%, the easier way to do that, because the 1% are usually very quiet, don't really talk about their systems and stuff like that. The easier thing to do is identify what the 99% suck at, because you've probably sucked at that same thing, much like I sucked at that same thing, and reverse engineer it, right? AKA, if feeling FOMO after selling a position early is something that always puts you on a massive tilt, right? Then what you have to do is figure out a solution, whether it be withdrawals, leaving screens, whatever the case may be, in order to reverse engineer and negate that bad trade, right? So I think it's easier from a brain understanding perspective for you to reverse engineer what the 99% fail at rather than what the 1% succeed at, right? If you can do that, you can put yourself in a very good position to succeed. Now, the last psychology pillars that I have is I often ask myself the question, what would the GOATs do? Now, for me, there are many different people that I consider trading GOATs. Umar Ashraf, Eric Marcus, Mike Spinoza, Andrew Diaz, Chris Holcomb, Kansas City Shuffle. Those to me are people that I really, there's probably a few that I'm forgetting, but I really put them on like a pedestal from like a knowledge perspective and just a historic perspective. So sometimes when I catch myself in a trade that I'm feeling kind of iffy about, I ask myself the question, I say, well, what would they do? If they were over there behind me, it's called the couch principle. If Andrew Diaz, stock market wolf, my very first ever mentor, was sitting on that couch behind me, watching me make the decisions that I'm making, what would he do? So I imagine for many of you, I might be that person. I don't take offense if I'm not, but think about that and use that. Like if Jake was on the couch right there behind me watching, what would he say? Right? Or if your spouse was there and you were explaining to them what trading was, right? And the trades that you were taking, and they knew your strategy, and they were like, wait, doesn't this not align? So it's almost like this way of like, and another thing that I really like to do with it, which I don't have in the slide, is what I call the stand up and step back. It literally is where you stand up, take a step back, and then all of a sudden you just crouch over your desk, right? Or you just look like you're just, you look from now, it feels like you're in a third person perspective. For me, literally that process of standing up and stepping back makes monumental strides in my ability to manage a position, right? And manage it well, right? So with that, my friends, clocking in at 90 minutes thick. Somebody asked yesterday, are all the lessons just 1 hour? No, my friends, I mentioned yesterday, last one was the last 1 hour one we're going to have for a while. At a thick 90 minutes, that is everything that I have for you in our lesson 2. Now, I know that we have not delved into the charts yet, and that is what everyone is looking forward to. I promise you, tomorrow night, we start that journey, and I literally would not cover any of this material unless it was truly and utterly 100% necessary, right? Like if I wasn't going to circle back to this later on when I do my checklist of what to look for in a trade, if I wasn't going to circle back to this and say, okay, and answer your question, like this is absolutely necessary. And I hope that I explained it to you in a way that was incredibly engaging, kept your attention the whole time, and completely changed your perspective on risk management, R multiple, and trading psychology. Now, before we go, I have a request. I haven't done this in a while. I didn't do this for the entirety of Mastermind 9.0, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna ask a favor. Way back when, way back when, in Mastermind 1.0, in order to showcase the energy that students had, at the end of the class, I would have the students type LFG or rake or something like that. Now, being the industry leader that I am, several people, and I'm definitely not referring to just one person here because it's literally everybody else who sells a mastermind or a course, decided, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. They're going to tell their people to do LFGs at the end of the check. I get it. I'm an innovator. People do it. For the entirety of Mastermind 9.0, I was over it. I was like, too many people do this. It doesn't even look authentic anymore. It looks like I'm copying others, and it's really annoying because I've been doing that. I'm the pioneer. However, I saw a few the other day, and again, not referring to one person, I'm referring to like 6 different people. And it got on my nerves because they were very slow. They were very slow. It was very slow, and the program was very hyped up. In my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's how fast ours was when we had 30 people in Mastermind 2. Like, what? So I asked this with a humble heart. With a humble heart, if you wouldn't mind, just fill in the chat with goats or rakes or LFGs or whatever the case may be. Just so one time we can show who the real goats of the LFG, the originator of the energetic chat. I mean, this is the energy, my friends. I love everybody else who does this. I am the pioneer. This is the energy that we have in our program at all times. I don't even do this anymore because everybody does it, but this is how it goes. Like, this is how Mastermind students feel about the program. This is the energy that we operate with on every single one of our programs. I love you all so, so much. If you enjoyed the energy over the last 2 lessons, I promise you, the next 3 are going to blow your mind. We're about to enter the thick stretch of it. We're about to enter the thickest of our lessons, right? After that, we cool down a little bit because I literally give you so much information over the course of the next 3. They're all going to be at least 1:45 hours long, probably a 2-hour mark, right? So stay ready. We're about to crush this tomorrow night. I love you all so, 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 so much. I hope you have an amazing rest of your night. I love yous. I love yous. I'll get this recording posted ASAP. Cheers, gang.